Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partner is committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, which includes complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator. Today, our moderator is Monique Jefferson, who is Chief People Officer at the Community Preservation Corporation. We're excited to have Monique and our panelists for a panel discussion called Engage, Train, Retain, Mastering Employee Experience to Thrive in Challenging Times. Welcome, Monique, and welcome, panelists. Over to you.
Thank you, Eric. Good day, everyone. Very excited to have the opportunity to be a moderator for today's panel. So let's just jump right in. Let's first give our panelists an opportunity to go around and virtually introduce themselves. And if you can also tell us where you are joining us from today. Today, I am joining you from New York City, where CPC offices are.
Okay, thank you, Monique, and hello, everyone. I'm Sherry-Ann Abramitis. I am the CHRO for the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, and I'm currently based in Washington, D.C. I previously worked for the Asia Society in New York City as the Managing Director of People and Culture and have about 25 years in international HR, first for for-profits and primarily in the nonprofit sector for about the last 20 years. So I'm passionate about employee culture, engagement, and experience, and I'm so happy to be here with you today to talk about these items. Thank you.
Thank you, Shereen. Alyssa, who was our panelist joining us on the phone?
Yes, hi. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. This is Elisa Tarrant, CHRO for HR Doctor. We do healthcare staffing and we have healthcare agencies across the nation. And I'm also very, very passionate about culture and engagement. We have so many dynamics with the remote workforce, the changing times post-pandemic. So I'm here to really help with that and engage in that, and also employee engagement. These things are very important to all of us, I'm sure. I have 26 years of experience in human resources, 15 plus in leadership roles, VP and above. Love helping people. That's the human part of human resources. And I'm very, very happy to be here. It's a pleasure to take part in this. And I'm calling in from Palm Springs, California. Unfortunately, my half miles from the eye of the storm passing, so my internet is not on right now. So I will try to stay on via this call.
Well, thank you, Elisa, for going through such great challenges to join us this morning. We really do appreciate having you here. So let's jump into our questions. We've mentioned and talked a lot around culture as well as engagement. So when we talk about engaged employees, what exactly does that mean? How are engaged employees different from, let's say, disengaged employees? And what are some of the behaviors that we see when we see that our employees are engaged versus what are some of the behaviors we see when they are disengaged? Shereen, we'll start with you.
All right. Thanks, Monique. Yeah, excellent questions. I think an engaged employee really tends to feel more energized, enthusiastic, and committed to their work and to the organization. They're committed to the organization's mission, to its values, and to its success, right? They want to be a part of that success. And I think, you'll find that engaged employees tend to work more effectively with their teams, their managers, and they really help the organization move forward in a positive way. I think some of the signs for recognizing an engaged employee is someone who likes to bring new ideas to the workplace. They're passionate about the work that they do. You'll find them taking initiative. They always want to improve themselves or looking to improve the organization's systems because they're invested in it, right? They'll exceed your expectations. They're curious to learn about new things. They'll ask questions. They'll encourage others in the team. I think they're optimistic. They'll smile often. I mean, overall, they'd be most committed to the organization and will do whatever it takes, right, to get things done. I think in terms of disengagement, when you see a lack of initiative, low productivity, they may be irritable, they may make careless mistakes, they may have difficulty getting through challenges, they may withdraw. You may see poor communication or complacency, perhaps even cynicism or lack of participation. And you want to find out, well, is this because of something within your organization, or is it because there's something in their personal life, right? And so those are items to explore. But I think that those are essentially, at least what I think I've seen in terms of engaged and disengaged employees. Back to you, Monique.
Yeah, one of the things that I would add to that, someone once said to me, they gave an analogy, which I think is very applicable here, and it has to do with your heart and your mind. And so when you have truly engaged employees, not only is their head in the game, but their heart is in the game. So that goes back to what you were saying around engaged employees have a connection, or they tend to feel a connection to the mission of the organization. And they find that their values are aligned to whatever the corporate values are of that particular organization. They're not, and in addition to that, they're also more productive, but they also can see, and they can tell you how the work that they do and how their contribution has a direct impact on the organization. They can really see how their work and how they're contributing to the overall mission of the organization. So you really do see that. So both their head and their heart is in the game when you have employees that are very engaged. Elisa, do you have anything that you would add to that as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And with, especially within healthcare facilities, we know that's a little different venue, and patient care really is always the bottom line. So we don't want disengaged employees, because then it actually spills over to the patient care, which never ends well. It's always some type of a violation. I've seen, and I'll start with the disengaged employees. With disengaged employees, what I've seen, and in other industries as well, as I've worked in other industries, but in healthcare, again, it impacts the patient care, it impacts the external and internal customer service. And what I've seen in disengaged employees is that they call off. Their attendance record is low, their efforts are low, their production is low. And even like you were saying, Monique, to the matter of the heart, their heart is not in it. So their attitude and behavior generally is a bit toxic, very negative, and it spills over to the other employees, it spills over to the customer service, to the organization goals and maximizing those goals. So it maximizes things in the wrong direction. And it's, that's why it's so important to really curb the disengaged employee, to find out what is causing them to feel disengaged. Why are they not engaging? Where is the nucleus of this issue? And then try to start fixing that. Because I've seen over 26 years, that can take down an entire organization, because the culture really are the legs that we stand on. And if those legs are weak from disengagement, the organization's not going to do well. Now, with engaged employees, I've seen a lot of them, and the difference is they will pick up the baton. If you ask, I've had many projects where I'll say, okay, who on my team wants to be a part of this? It's going to be extra hours, it's going to be extra work, but you're going to learn new things. And you can always tell the engaged employees, because they're the first ones to raise their hands. They're the first ones to jump in and go above and beyond. They're the first ones to really care about, is there a patient care issue? Is there an HR department issue? Is there something I can help with? And I've had many over the years that they'll come and they'll proactively say, hey, how can I help? How can I help mentor employees? How can I be a preceptor? What can I do to help the organization? So those engaged employees are just paramount to the success of the company. And over the years, I've seen that transition. And so we want those engaged employees. We want to find out why they're not engaged, and what can we do to help them get engaged, so that we can overall help the organization meet its goals. And that's my input on that.
Yeah, it's a theme around what both of you said, or what each of you said, was around disengaged employees are doing the bare minimum, Whereas engaged employees are really going above and beyond. And so that also ties back to what we were discussing around contribution. Engaged employees can see how their contribution and their exceeding and going above and beyond really drives the business, and also it helps to fulfill the mission of the organization. So now, what do you do if you have critical mass, if you have a critical mass of employees who are disengaged? So one of the things I heard, I believe it was Elisa mention, is first and foremost, we need to understand why. Why is that? What's driving that? Particularly if it's in a pocket or a critical mass within your organization where you can clearly see that they're disengaged. First and foremost, we need to understand and unpack that and try to really understand why. But once we identify that and understand that, then what are some of the things that we can do to address that? Shireen, we'll start with you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, certainly if you have a critical mass of employees who are disengaged, you want to explore that, right? And you want to understand that and get to the heart of it. And I mean, you can do that through surveys, through listening sessions, just meetings with staff and asking them, how are you feeling? What are your thoughts? What's working well? What needs to work better? Having one-on-one conversations and stay interviews. And you want to hear from staff, I think, from as many ways as possible to try to get at the crux of what is causing the disengagement. And as Elise said earlier, I mean, it's quite catchy, right? You just need to have a small number of disengaged employees, and soon you could have a very large number of critical mass. So you certainly want to get at the heart of what's causing that. So I think of doing an assessment through surveys, through listening with staff, through conversations, through stay interviews, perhaps through some committees that you have organized, and then creating an action plan, right, to address the items that are raised, and communicating with staff what that plan is and progress made so that they know their voices are being heard and that they're a part of this process, right? And there are things that you can do also to encourage them, something like a fun committee we have here at EGPATH, maybe employee resource groups. And I think also just looking for the opportunity to create or facilitate opportunities for staff to be able to come together and connect both inside and outside of the workplace where possible.
Yeah, what you're saying, what's key is that you have to engage them. You need to, like, pardon the word of engagement, but you have to bring them along and make them part of the solution, and in turn and involve them in the things and the activities and the initiatives and efforts that you're taking to address the disengagement, right? Include them, make them part of the solution. And then also something else that you said that's very important, where I find a lot of organizations tend to fall short. We put all this energy and effort into identifying the problem and trying to address the problem, but sometimes we might be addressing the wrong thing. Like, we're not really getting to what the root cause of the disengagement is. And so then when we do all these initiatives and activities, we fall short on the communication, because we don't circle back and say, this is what we heard, this is what you told us, and this is what we've done, the actions that we've taken to address it. Organizations fall short on that. And then when you go to reassess, to measure, then employees are like, well, you didn't do anything. You asked me for the feedback, or I told you what was going on and you didn't do anything, when actually we did. We just did a poor job of communicating our actions back out. So, Elisa, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, and it's along those lines. I love the dialogue, and yeah, you're absolutely right, both of you, and the nucleus. And that's why I talk about the nucleus of the issue, because if you don't start, really, like you said, with the actions from the nucleus or from the core of what is the problem. So, some ideas, I mean, what I've done in the past is send out an anonymous survey so that they can comfortably, speak their mind, whether it be good, bad, or ugly. And I've actually told the managers, hey, it doesn't matter what it is, let them do the survey. It's private, it's confidential, it's anonymous, so that they can put their input, because we don't know where to put the action plans or what to put them to, even in the culture meetings or the DE&I meetings or things like that, if we don't understand the root of the problem. So that to me is probably the most critical point, is understanding the root of that problem, putting an action plan to it, and then I've rolled out those action plans to, to the staff, and then having the managers report back in, working with HR to make sure that those action plans are being facilitated and actually acted out, and then putting the results up. I mean, I've done as much as going down into the weeds. We put the results up in the break room, in the cafeteria, where they can access and see, hey, on this date, this was the survey, this was the result, this date is where the action came from, and this is what we did to remedy it. And then, of course, doing the culture meetings, the DE&I, and the different things to get them together, but that they understand they have been heard, and we are looking at it from that point.
So let's shift for a moment and talk a little bit about the employee experience, right? So what do we mean when we talk about, or when we mention the employee experience? And I think for me, the way that we kind of define that very broadly, to say from onboarding, or from the moment that the candidate accepts the offer, they become an employee. And some might even define it, include the candidate experience as part of that as well. But it starts from when they officially become an employee. So that's the onboarding, the orientation phase, all the way through to exit, whether that's retirement, whether that's a voluntary exit. So that whole life cycle, if you will, of the employee, that's what we're defining as the employee experience during their time with us. And so when we talk about the employee experience and how that ties and connects to engagement, what are some of the engagement activities or engagement things that we can do during that life cycle to enhance or improve the employee experience and make it better? Elisa, let's start with you this time.
I think that, a way to make that employee experience better really starts at the beginning with the onboarding, and that's been my experience. If we start them, because I've done a lot of acquisitions, and when we transition employees from one culture to another, from one organization to another, whether they're new employees or it's through a merger acquisition, everybody coming into their role is always, very little bit of anxiety, a little bit, I don't know what to expect, I don't know anybody, I don't know anything. So I think really starting that experience begins with their beginning of their journey. And that's why I've developed a lot of policies or practices where they're welcome to not just to onboard and orientation, not just jumping on a computer and doing some training, but an actual in-person or virtual orientation. A lot of it's virtual because some of them are across the nation, but really doing like a welcome orientation for those employees. And that's how, I think that it's best to start there, because if we don't start at the beginning of their journey, they're coming in with, they don't know our culture, they don't understand what to adapt to, they don't know how to acclimate. And then with the existing employees, where we've had a culture shift in some of the facilities, really making that engagement process clear and hearing them. What do you want? What will help you engage more with the organization? How can we help you succeed? And then listening to that feedback, and again, putting action to that. And that's been extremely successful. We have the great minds at the top, we have the C-suite, and we have all these processes and budgets and things that we follow from a high level view, but they're not successful for the staff unless we hear their feedback. So employee engagement always needs to be based on what is the feedback. Obviously, we can't do everything. They may want, a Visa gift card every month for $100. We can't do that all the time, but we can do meetings, we can do outings, we can do virtual lunches. There's things that we can do to engage. We can hear them and then put engagement practices in place based on the feedback that we get. So that's generally what I've always done, and it's always been very successful.
I think what's key is that the employee needs to feel supported at every stage in that life cycle, from beginning, orientation, onboarding, till the end, and everything in between. So offering career development opportunities, the work itself that an employee has, do they feel a connection or committed to the work? Do they feel that it's value add, right, work? Or is it just a very administrative, transactional, low value add type of work? Or is it more strategic? Are they learning? Are they learning and gaining new skills? All of these, if you're offering these things to the employees, that will speak to the employee experience. It's not just about, total rewards and offer and paying them a lot of money, but it's important.
Right.
They're getting good experiences. They're being developed. They're being provided with feedback so that they understand how they can grow. They're giving good value add work to be done, to complete. And then also there's the benefits piece, but benefits holistically, whether it's your, health and welfare, your medical, your 401k, retirement benefits as well. And now, as you know, mental health and wellness and well-being is a big piece of this as well, right? So it's all those things at different points in the life cycle that are really helping to support and enhance the employee experience. Shireen, is there anything that you would add to that?
Well, I mean, I would just reiterate, this welcoming and supportive environment is something that we certainly want to create, and it can make all the difference. I mean, I can just share with you, before I joined my organization, right? I was applying for this and one other job. And as a candidate, my experience was so much more clear and timely and warm interviewing with this organization than with another. And that was, for me, the deciding factor, right? When choosing between the two. And just to give you, a few examples, I mean, after I accepted the opportunity here at EGPAP, everyone that I'd interviewed with, they all sent me separate welcome notes, right? And so already you start to feel a sense of belonging, right? Which is just a really nice way to enter into an organization. And as HR professionals, we certainly want to make sure that employees continue to feel that as they move along, right? And so much goes into that. I mean, part of it is the culture of the organization, but it can be things like the physical workspace, right, that they have. And do you have on their first day paper, notepads and a pen and something that helps to welcome them in? Is there
Did you
someone?
give them swag?
Yes, the swag always helps.
Yeah.
The little things always matter, right? And the technology, right? Is their laptop ready? Is their computer ready? I mean, all of these things go into that initial experience, but then we want to keep that going, right, as they're on. And, what you were talking about there, both of you, I mean, in terms of training and development, and can they see what their career path and journey would look like clearly in this organization? Does the culture support a positive, respectful, ethical, and fun work environment? And so I think there's just a lot that goes into the experience, but I really think it's important that all along the way, employees feel like they belong to the organization, right? Even before they do.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit, we've mentioned a little bit around concrete actions that we can take to transform and improve the employee experience, as well as creating that connection for employees. And you mentioned a sense of belonging. And previously we talked about engagement surveys. We also, I think we said stay interviews. We could also mention exit surveys, although it might be too late for some. Exit surveys can be very valuable because you can get that data. You have that data to then address and work on for the people that are still there, right? To make it a better experience for them. At a previous employer, two of the things that we did in terms of concrete actions that really helped us transform and improve the employee experience. One was around, we implemented a technology platform where it was actually an engagement technology tool, but it was real time, in the moment, where employees could go in and, if they wanted to go in every day, they could, but it was a platform where employees could go in and give us feedback about anything and everything in the organization. And we would see an uptick in employee feedback and responses whenever we were rolling out a new process or a new tool or a new system. Employees were really good about logging in and going in and saying, I love it, I don't, and here's why. So we were able to be on the pulse, have the constant pulse of the organization, and really react and address the feedback more timely to help enhance the employee experience. The other thing that we did, we also implemented a coaching platform. So we wanted to scale coaching because we saw the connection between providing coaching to all employees and how that tied to engagement. So we implemented a technology platform that allowed in the moment real-time coaching that everybody could take advantage of. We saw this used the most during our performance management and evaluation processes when people were either setting goals or they were having a mid-year conversation or they were preparing for a feedback discussion with their manager, or managers had to give feedback or receive feedback. They were able to use this coaching platform as a way to do that and to receive coaching, and that which also tied to higher levels of engagement. So those are just two things that we were able to do at a previous employer that we really saw the direct impact on not only on the employee experience, but also on levels of engagement. Elisa, are there any concrete actions that your organization has taken?
Basically similar, exactly what you said. We've done basically the same things, and it's been extremely successful. Extremely successful.
Shireen, anything you would add?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I loved what you mentioned there about coaching. And, that's even something we've been talking about here too. In the past, we've heard talking about a positive workplace, a respectful workplace, an ethical workplace, but also a coaching workplace, right? If we can train our leaders to be not just managers, but also coaches, right? I think that can go a very long way in an employee's experience. I think another area that's important is recognizing and celebrating employee successes, right? And I know there are a number of ways to do this, and there are also a lot of new platforms coming up that allow you to do. I know we're looking at one right now that will allow us to do this globally because we're an international organization. But I think, ensuring that we do celebrate those successes is important. And you talked earlier, Monique, about, mental health and wellness. And I think encouraging a healthy work-life balance and providing flexibility in the places where we can be flexible is also important. And the last thing I'll say is if there's any instance of bullying, harassment, anything just like that, that it has to be addressed right away, right? Because you could do all these wonderful things, but if those kinds of things are left to slide, then, all the rest will be for naught, right? So I think it's just really important when there are issues to address them immediately. Back to you.
Absolutely. So let's talk about data and how we can gain insights around the employee experience and engagement through data. As I mentioned before, we said exit data or exit surveys, stay interviews, the standard employee engagement surveys, also benchmarking. I have found that in the past, we have really leveraged and looked at benchmarking and trying to compare our organization, whether it's by the sector or in particular peer group, in terms of the total rewards and what we're offering and what we're providing to our employees versus what some of our peers and competitors are offering as well. So I do find that benchmarking data can also be helpful. Are there any other types of data that you guys use to measure and look at employee engagement, and how does that tie back to the employee experience? Shireen, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think in addition I think there's an echo. I was going to say, in addition to the, engagement or pulse surveys that we've been talking about, I think 360 reviews when, for example, in a previous organization, we did 360 reviews as a leadership development tool, right? Not as a performance management tool, but as a growth and development tool. And in HR, we could see the overall trends, right, to see how managers were doing. And also managers got to work on particular areas. But I think that, that can be very telling in terms of where you want to make an impact, because they say that employees either stay or leave because of the person or individual that they report into. So it's very important to target the leaders in your organization. So I would say 360 reviews is a good way when used as a development tool, as opposed to a performance tool. And then also turnover trends are very important, right? To see, well, how are you doing compared to others in your industry? So I think that that's another area. And even something as simple as how many vacation days do employees use, right? If employees are using their vacation days, it's because they feel the workplace is well managed. Their teams aren't going to suffer greatly in their absence. They're not worried about coming back, hopefully, to 200 emails. So, I think these are all some other areas that we could consider.
I also, and I'm trying to remember the name of the organization, but I had heard that there was an organization where they had set up where when the employee came in, this was pre-pandemic, when the employee came in to work each day and they logged on to their desktop or laptop, there was a pop-up box, and it was almost like the smiley faces, like when you go to the airport or something, or you use the bathroom and on your way out, they want you to press one of the smiley faces to talk about how was your experience in the bathroom? Was it clean? Was it this? Was it that? I had heard of an organization that did something very similar. So in the morning, when the employees would come in, they would log on, they would get a pop-up box before anything else, and it would just ask them real time in the moment for the day, how are you? How are you feeling today? How's it going? Is it going well, not well, etc. But that was another way to kind of measure and get real time, feedback on a somewhat daily basis around how your employees were feeling and how your employees were doing. I also know some managers that employ that technique or that approach with meetings as well. So before they'll start a meeting, they'll say, can we go around the room and have every employee just one word define where they're at today, how they're feeling. And that really speaks to an employee's well-being, overall mental health and wellness, because more often than not, if the employee is going through a challenge or experiencing something and it's outside of work, they're bringing that to the workplace. And so they may not be their best selves, or they might not be in the right headspace, and you're trying to have a pretty important meeting. So it's good to know that up front so that you can manage that as a leader, where everybody is at and what everybody is coming to the meeting with. So I have found that those two things are a good way to just kind of gauge real time very quickly in the moment and try to measure where people are at from an engagement standpoint. Elisa, would you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I do agree with her. The 360 and the evals, the interviews, things like that, that's extremely good data points for their development, and also to kind of see where the culture is and where the staff is as far as engagement. And then, of course, the exit interviews. We also, with many locations, I've done the orientation interviews, and that's what we call them. We do an orientation interview. Something we developed at the beginning to kind of see what they're coming from, and what they're expecting to come into. And that's been, really overlooked, but it's been very helpful. And that really helps to navigate how to engage, this department, this staff. And then to your point, Monique, the other thing that's been done is health and wellness or health awareness meetings with some of the management teams, where they will ask, in the beginning of their huddle morning meeting, how are you feeling? Is there something we need to deal with? Is there a resource that you need? How can we help you this morning? And that was launched just a few months ago at a couple locations, and been very successful in engaging those employees that really, as you said, may have something going on at home that's critical, but they do bring it to work. And they need to know that there is support, and that there is, and a lot of times when people are going through traumatic situations or dramatic situations, they're not going to volunteer it or voice it, or they feel like they don't want to bother people. But when the leadership really chimes in and says, hey, is there anything we can help you with? How's everybody doing today? They go around the table, they go around the huddle meeting, and then they support one another. And those have been implemented and very successful. So yes, to all of your points, those are great things. And then the one thing I would add is that orientation interview. It's been extremely helpful.
Wonderful. Okay. So at this point now, I'm going to turn turn it over and pivot to the Q&A portion and to see what questions have been coming in from our listeners and the people that are joining us today. So the first question I see in Q&A is, what else can employees do to get a company to show they want change, especially when pulse surveys have been done, yet there's been no action taken, nothing has changed?
Well, I would say you could go to HR and express these concerns would be one way. If you have a workplace committee or something similar, or other types of committees who could come together, because sometimes there is strength in numbers, but also it's not as scary, right? To then bring up to leadership what the concerns are, right? I think that those are a couple of avenues to help bring about change.
The other thing that I would add to that is going back to data, but different kind of data that's beyond the pulse survey. So depending on what type of organization you're at, like most of my experience has been in professional and financial services, and they want to see the data and the data, how that ties to their strategic goals and helps move and drive the business. So if you can find data, concrete data that shows by us not doing this change, or by us not doing X, Y, and Z, here's the impact that it has on your business, on the bottom line, on profitability, on revenue, et cetera. And this is the impact that it's having on, your ability as a leader to meet your goals. I always find that when you position the data and you pull the data in that way, they're a little bit more receptive and willing to get on board with the change that you're trying to create. So, Elisa, do you have anything to add before I move on to the next question?
No, that's exactly what I would have said. Awesome.
So our second question is, what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in trying to improve their employee experience, and how did they get past it? That's a good question.
That's a good question. I think the biggest mistake I've seen companies or a company make was really not developing the engagement in a way that develops the career. They tried to just throw money at it, and we've talked about that. And the biggest mistake was they had many employees on the survey saying they wanted to see their career development path. They wanted tuition reimbursement. These were the benefits and the steps they were looking for. And in response to the survey for that room for improvement, instead of addressing that and starting to develop maybe a tuition reimbursement program or develop a career path or strategic planning for their career growth, they just tried to give them more PTO days, and it turned into, it was chaotic. The employees felt like nobody really cared, nobody listened, and they became more disengaged than they were. So that we salvaged that by we had to do a town hall with all employees, with the senior leadership, and really just, come clean. And the senior leadership just apologized. Hey, we're going to listen to you. We're going to start developing some programs for your career development. We heard you. And, at that point, it's a very humbling experience, but, how far is a company willing to go to make sure their staff stays in place? And it was recoverable. And it did very well after that. And I think that was just, the transparency was needed.
Yeah, I think employees feel like it's not genuine if an organization is not responding to what is clearly being stated, right, within these different avenues and forums. So I think it's just very, very important to be honest about data and feedback from surveys and other sources, even if it's, not something that the leadership may be too pleased about, but that opens the door, right, to make things better for the future. And that's something that we need to share with leadership, because I found sometimes leadership doesn't necessarily want that reported out, some of the areas for improvement, let's call them, right? But I think it just is the beginning point for an honest conversation, that we need to sell that to leadership, and we need to go back to staff and say, here's what we heard from you. We realize we have an issue. This is what we're going to do to address it, and just hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying before around the biggest fault where companies fall short is that they do all these initiatives and efforts, but we need to do a better job of communicating back to the employee. This is what we heard and this is what we did. And then to take it even a step further, and here's what the result or the impact has been. And I just think in general, one of those we don't do as good of a job as we should or we could do. So now our next question, what kind of employee experiences do you think people will be looking for over the next couple of years? So when I think about this particular question, one of the things that comes to mind is around really understanding your employee demographic. And so if you have a high population of employees that are, like, let's say parents, new parents or early parents, parents of young ones, or if you have a high population of employees who are elder care, who are taking care of their own parents, making sure that you are offering benefits that meet the employees where they're at and helping them with their needs. We have as we all know, our population is aging and more of our employees are having to take care of other family members, whether it's their children, whether it's their parents, etc. And so that there's an opportunity there that we can try to meet and support the employees with by making sure we're offering some type of maybe insurance coverage, right? To help them in trying to meet the needs of their family as well, or daycare, whether it's backup daycare or on-site daycare. So really understanding what is your demographic of the organization and what their needs are, and then making sure that you're putting programs and initiatives in place to support that. But particularly in that health and wellness, well-being space, that's where I see the biggest need or this employee experience changing over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that all started with, not started, but it really kicked off during COVID, right? The need for health and wellness benefits, initiatives, and to ensure that, staff had the resources that they needed. I think, AI technology, that's going to be interesting as we go forward. Don't know yet where that's going to lead, but I think that's something else interesting, at least to think about. And then I think with the younger demographic, some more mobile experiences, right? Being able to do job applications on their phone, or being able to do those check-ins, how are you feeling today on a phone? I think they'll be looking for more of those kinds of things as well, in addition to the work-life balance, wellness and health and flexibility.
Elisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything she said, especially, and I think that's where the focus is too, is with the generation coming in, everything is very, it's very tech focused, it's very virtual focused, and I think staying up with that is extremely, extremely important. And like I was saying earlier, it's very hard to do business without internet, without that technology, and it's very hard for a business to, to have a good culture, good engagement, or good goals without that. So I think that's extremely important.
We have time for one last question. So our last question will be, would you consider gamification of training to encourage employees better utilize available training resources, for example, like a LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or any in-house LMS that you may have, so that, in their effort to pursue newer skills and knowledge?
So I know there are a number of organizations that do this already, right? It's just a matter of planning that out. So yeah, we're always looking for ways to have employees complete the courses. I think it's just how far you take it, right? Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree. There is quite a few organizations, and I think that's a really, really integral part of not just engagement, but retention. I think that they need to know there's resources to continue growing and developing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I definitely think organizations should do that. I also think what would help to increase utilization is the type of courses and offerings that you have, making sure that if I'm a finance professional not only do I, but I have an interest in sales, let's just say, not only offering courses and programming within the finance function, but offering more broad courses so that I can also, if I'm just interested and I want to learn new skills, that I have the ability to tap into that and take advantage of those other types of sales offerings or other types of programming to align to my interest as well. So making sure that you're offering breadth of offerings with your courses will also help with utilization. So on that note, Eric, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you to both of our panelists for a great dialogue and discussion today.
Great. Thanks, Monique. And thanks, panelists, for that insightful panel discussion, especially for persevering through a difficult environment. I'd also like to thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thanks very much.